Never forget what they did to us with Abu Dhabi 2021, because they're still doing it using the media. Now, worldwide media has an approved narrative. That narrative is the approved version of the news given by the Reuters news agency. You've probably heard of the Reuters news agency, who certify and verify the news. Now, you need to look into the ownership of the Reuters news agency. And from what I'm able to understand, it's ultimately owned by the Rothschilds, the banking empire, who own countries. Ultimately, your governments are controlled by the financial private banking empire. Your government serves that. And their agencies effect regime change to make sure that the puppeted government serves that banking empire. So the secret services of the countries, that's who they actually serve. So the Reuters approved version of the events that gets distributed around the world to every news outlet, well, who owns the narrative? Who controls the version of events that everybody is then presented with? It serves their agenda. That agenda of control and exploitation. Control the minds, control people's understanding, and they are the ones who exploit. Now, if you go onto YouTube and check out the Sky Sports F1 YouTube page, YouTube channel, and in this bit where you've got the magnifying glass for searching, just type in Abu Dhabi 2021, and this is the list of search results that comes up. And there's many videos, and the couple that I'm going to be focusing on one, but by all means do this in your own time. The couple that are important for the current analysis are these two that are now into screen. The one that is done the day after Abu Dhabi 2021, called It Would Be Terribly Sad. They roll Martin Brundle out in front of us the very next day, and that's the presentation I'm going to go through now. And then a few weeks later, they then roll him out again. Michael Massey, Red Bull Audio at Abu Dhabi, really uncomfortable, says Martin Brundle. Okay, so this is what they have to do to try to quell public unrest. They have to roll out the expert to try and pacify the masses, and this here is the explanation given to Brundle. Now, again, think of all sports worldwide. Think of when there might have been something that was outrageous. When have they ever had to roll out one of the experts of the sport to validate it? In the recent 2026 World Cup, there was controversy in the match between Egypt and Argentina, and that revolved around the fouls that Argentina were allowed to get away with, the VAR decision that disallowed the Egyptian goal for a foul way back by the Egyptian penalty area, and when Argentina scored, there was no such reviews. I don't recall them rolling a so-called expert of football out to make a special presentation the very next day to validate that happening. Now, in Formula One, this is what they did. So I'm going to click on this. It's likely to come up with an advert, so I'm going to pause it if it does. So check this video out yourself. There's the advert right there. Okay, fast forwarded that. So we're going to go through it. Now, I've been through this multiple times, but what we must always remember is the truth. And the truth, let's keep the truth in our minds as we're listening to Brundle's bullshit. The truth is, those lapped cars were released on lap 57. It was not possible for them to release them on lap 56. We saw the clear-up operation. They didn't show us it on global feed. We got a glimpse that many people will not understand the relevance of. I've done videos where I've shown Latifi's on boards, I've shown the car swinging round, I've shown the marshals on the track sweeping out up for all that time. And what we see on the global feed is that snake of cars passing there on lap 56. There is no way that the clerk of the course could have declared that track safe on lap 56 in sufficient time to unlap those, release those lapped cars, and the last of them past the leader and the safety car, because that is what must have had happened on lap 56, so that lap 57 could be that mandatory safety car lap afforded to those released cars, and that is the only way we'd have got a racing lap. That's the facts of it. That is known to race control. Michael Massey has demonstrated in his tenure as race director that he knew what he was doing, and by not releasing 3 of 5, what it did, it insulated Max Verstappen from attack by third place Carlos Sainz. It separated out 2 competitors in a multi-competitor event, which you're not allowed to do. In any Grand Prix, you would not allow a safety car incident, and then when that race resumed, just have first and second separated out, and third downwards handicapped slightly from being able to race and attack them straight away. You just wouldn't allow it. That's against the rules of the sport. That's what they did. Also, the released cars were racing under yellow. I don't think there's going to be any mention of that. So keep all of that in mind. So without all of the other things I'm talking about, the responses of the drivers, the commentary from the day before, keep the rules in mind and keep the implications. The fact that Norris was previously fighting Gasly in that race prior to Latifi crashing. Norris was actually closer to Gasly than Verstappen was to Hamilton, and now, because the regulation wasn't carried out, Norris was left over a minute behind Gasly. So, let's now go through what they rolled Brundle out to explain to the world in the aftermath of Abu Dhabi. This is what they created on purpose to try to appease the fans of the sport, because the fans were clearly outraged. Social media went berserk in the aftermath of Abu Dhabi 2021, and the media realised they had to somehow put out their explanations to try to pacify the people. But instead of talking about the truth, they came out with all sorts of bullshit to feed people, to then go off to argue in the comment sections of social media. So here we go.
Martin, thanks for joining us. Everybody has been talking about this, so 24 hours or so on. What are your thoughts on what happened?
Well, it was an incredible few minutes of sport, wasn't it?
No, when the rules are broken, it ceases to become sport, Martin.
Very grave consequences if you were Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes-Benz, and an amazing experience if you were Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Very complex.
It's very complex. Don't you worry your little head.
Matter. So it was so exciting.
But it was exciting, wasn't it, kiddies?
A wonderful finale to a wonderful Grand Prix season.
If you're who? A wonderful finale. Says who? That's how they want to present it.
But then, of course, there's a lot of controversy around it, and it's all a bit uncomfortable and doesn't shine a particularly good light on Formula One and its process.
There's controversy and it's uncomfortable. So explain, Martin.
But it was a hugely complex and...
But it was complex. See, I can explain the complexities, Martin. You're the expert of the sport. Why can't you explain the complexities? There are a set of regulations. Now, here's another thing. Many casual viewers of sport, if they were asked the question, what is the difference between the rules of the sport, the laws of the sport, or the regulations relating to a sport? Most casual viewers, if you ask them that question, they probably would not be able to give you an answer. And this show knows that. So they dress this regulation up as being, it's just the process that they tend to do, but it's not mandatory, when it absolutely is. It's basically the regulations relating to the safety car are the set of instructions that must be followed if you choose to deploy that safety car. So the moment you choose to deploy the safety car, these are the steps that you must follow. That's exactly all they are. But the casual viewer, or even most avid fans of the sport, don't necessarily understand it with that level of clarity. And the reason being is commentary doesn't explain it that way. Instead, it hypes it up and instead pretends, oh, what are they going to do now? It's a safety car. What's going to happen now? Well, quite simply, it's a step-by-step process. But they present it as, oh, it could be this, it could be that. What's the race director going to choose to do on this occasion? That is a manipulation. That is exploiting people, exploiting people's ignorance. But that ignorance is by design because they have not informed people in the appropriate manner. They seek to attract you, your custom, and your attention, and yet they don't inform you of what is actually real. That's an abuse.
Compressed moment
It was hugely complex and compressed. These are the only words you can use.
And several regulations were tripping over themselves.
You can look at his eyes, and he's clearly reading this. Several regulations were tripping over themselves. You see, at every other Grand Prix, did we have a situation where regulations tripped over themselves? No, we didn't. This set of step-by-step process, step-by-step instructions, the moment you deploy a safety car that must be carried out, they don't trip over themselves. But at Abu Dhabi, they tripped over themselves, says the expert.
Ended up with a bit of a hybrid solution there.
A hybrid solution. When have we ever had a hybrid solution there? In any sport, have you ever experienced or ever heard of, this is the hybrid solution to the rules or regulations or laws? But this is how they worded it. Look at him, he's reading.
Which is why the lawyers are getting involved.
Oh, the lawyers are getting involved. Law, that's complex, everybody. Don't you worry your little head. We'll say the lawyers are getting involved, and all people will then think is, oh, that's expensive, that's complicated, that's going to be a 4-year argument in front of judges and arguing this, arguing that, and it'll cost millions. The lawyers are getting involved. That's what they want you to believe. They don't want you to understand. They want to gaslight you with this notion of complexity, and therefore the notion of legal, which they gaslight complexity for as well.
And interpretation,
manipulation is the word you're looking for there, Martin. It's not about interpretation. There is no alternative interpretation of what should take place, because what should take place is grounded in context. Words, when they exist in a vacuum, in isolation, without context, can have different meanings. However, when they apply to a certain set of circumstances, they are then grounded in the context of that set of circumstances. So there is no alternative interpretation of those words. There never was, and there wasn't at Abu Dhabi 2021. That was a contrived manipulation to achieve the desired outcome.
Of wording in the regulations, and of course, the sporting regs are 99 pages.
The sporting regs are 99 pages. Well, I think half of each page is written in French and half of each page is written in English. Now, what we're talking about, Martin, is not 99 pages, is it? We're looking at Article 48, which is the part that relates to the safety car deployment. That's all we're looking at. That's a couple of pages long. And essentially, the step-by-step process, the first elements relate to how the safety car itself presents with its lights and how it enters the track, and the fact that it then will aim to pick up the lead car, and it may, if the first cars that it picks up aren't the lead car, it may wave them by if the circumstances are such that it doesn't need to keep every car behind it initially. It will then pick up the lead car and all the other cars will bunch, and they will then be lapping around until such times as the clerk of the course declares the track safe. Now, if no cars have been lapped, what it results in is the leader is the first car behind the safety car, and ultimately all the other cars in that field will bunch behind the leader. So what you end up with is a snake of cars in the correct race order with all of the previously built up advantages wiped out between all competitors. So essentially the restart condition is everybody bunch back up, approximately now half a second time gap between each car, and that is the minimum requirement that must happen when no lapping has taken place. The race has been neutralised, and now we reset to a scratch position where everybody is now all fully bunched back up before we go again. We've had to intervene on the grounds of safety. That's ruined the race for everybody in terms of the advantages built up. Everybody bunches back up. The same conditions apply for everybody. In the event of the leader and other cars lapping other cars in that field, then when the safety car gets the leader behind it, any cars that are lapped have to be held in that safety car snake in the first instance until the clerk of the course declares the track safe. And then, when it is declared safe, there is a mandatory procedure of releasing those lapped cars, providing they meet the qualifying criteria. All 8 did at Abu Dhabi 2021. They are released, and then they are afforded at least one further lap of that safety car with which to try to make it around the track and catch that safety car snake, again achieving the restart condition, which is this line of cars in the correct race order, all bunched up. Once you intervene in the race, racing is neutralised, and all of the previously built up advantages between all cars get wiped out. And that is how you do it. If you don't do it that way, you end up with a situation like we saw between Lando Norris and Pierre Gasly. They're in a race together. Norris is trying to catch Gasly, but the leader is in between the two. Safety car is deployed to deal with an incident. Safety car picks up the leader. Norris held back behind the leader. Gasly now disappears off around the track, gaining essentially a lap on Norris. You cannot have that. Hence, there is a mandatory procedure. There is no regulations tripping over one another. There is no hybrid solution. This is the expert rolled out to the crowd to try and appease the crowd.
You need to read every single word carefully.
Yes, there's 99 pages and you need to read every single one of them. Well, I didn't read you the 99 pages, but I've explained to you what needs to happen, because I've explained the implications of what needs to happen and how it can impact competitors if it doesn't happen. That's why you write these regulations, because it impacts sporting fairness.
It's like a legal document.
Oh, it's like a legal document. And lawyers manipulate. Judges manipulate. They contrive outcomes. That's why legal is what it is. It is a construct that is corrupt by its design, designed to protect power and wealth. Serving the Rothschilds banking empire, just like government serves the Rothschilds banking empire, just like the media gives the narrative to condition the minds of the masses. And they have their assassination teams such as the CIA and MI5, Mossad, serves those with aligned ideology, that of ruling the world, exploiting each and every one of us. That's how it really is. So, in order to hold the perpetrators to account, who have exploited each of us, we have to go to the exploiters' court, who serves the exploiters, and who will legally seek to manipulate the outcome using legal arguments of these fixers wearing costumes, presenting the illusion of integrity and expertise.
And the sporting code, which backs everything up, is, that sort of.
The experts just tell. I mean, how can you? Yeah, absolutely. I can see what you mean there, Martin. It's very complicated. The sporting code that backs everything up.
Document, and the sporting code, which backs everything up, is, that sort of.
Yeah, so none of us would be able to understand the nature of sport and what sport's all about, Martin. Yeah.
And it's just, it's a minefield.
Yes, the rules and regulations and laws of sport are a minefield. We all experience that with every sport we play. Nobody knows the rules of this sport. Nobody knows what to do. That comes to all of the professionals that play at a professional level, in the pinnacle of each sport, played on the global stage. It's a minefield. Nobody knows how this sport operates. Isn't it strange that here we have a sport that we show to the worldwide audience and nobody knows how it even works? It's crazy. It's just like the financial system. Nobody knows how it works, says Epstein. Just like the legal system. The law is an ass, they say. Nobody really knows how it works. It's a tool of manipulation. And those that sit atop of the organisation of Formula One, if you look at their board of directors, their hierarchy, you look at their professions, they're lawyers, legal, manipulators.
And in the heat of the moment, when Michael Massey, the race director, had to consider the safety of marshals, was the car out of the way, he couldn't release the car.
He had to consider the safety of marshals, was the car out of the way. You're relating this to Michael Massey. Michael Massey has the oversight of what is taking place. So what he does, he identified that there is a hazard on the track and has chosen to use the deployment of the safety car to deal with that problem. The moment he does, he puts out the safety measure. He could have said, yellow flags will be sufficient. He could have said, I'll deal with this using a virtual safety car. He could have said, I'll deal with this with a safety car. They will present, he could have red flagged it. It didn't meet the criteria where you would red flag such an event. So he's chosen the safety car. The moment he does so, the clear-up operation on the track, the responsibility for that is to the clerk of the course. So essentially, it hands to the clerk of the course for that. Michael Massey is sat in an air-conditioned office in race control. He has somebody to report back to him when he can then go further. That's how it works. Somebody on the ground, somebody in direct communication with all the marshals, somebody overseeing with the responsibility to pass off that section of track. That's legal. That's a legal duty, responsibility, because that is the person who can be held legally responsible by declaring the track safe because they've checked it, and it not being safe, then they'd get sued. They'd be held liable for any negative consequences that somebody endured or suffered due to the neglect or the gross incompetence of a clerk of the course who has declared something safe for racing which was dangerous and then somebody sustained injury or death from. So it's the clerk of the course who has eyes on the situation and can check it and say, yes, I'm satisfied, it's good, I hand back to you, we're good to go. Very simple, Brundle.
Until he was the lapped cars until he was certain that the track was reasonably clear, although
Michael Massey couldn't, let's just go through that. They couldn't release the cars until he was satisfied the track was reasonably clear. No, the regulation, the set of instructions is, once the clerk of the course has declared the track safe. It's nothing about reasonable, Martin. So you're reading, aren't you? You're reading a pre-prepared script to divert people's attention. Yes, the approved narrative, Martin.
Until he was the lapped cars until he was certain that the track was reasonably clear, although they
Race director has to be certain that the track is reasonably clear. No. Look at the regulations. I'm not going to go to them in this video, but the regulations, in fact, let's go to the regulations, Martin, that are 99 pages thick. Here they are, look. 2021 Formula One Sporting Regulations, published on the 8th of December 2021, issue number 13 that year. So we come down here, Martin will tell you, oh, they're 99 pages long. They're actually 56 pages long. The rest is just appendix. We need the Article 48, the safety car, which is on page 49. So let's go down to about here. I've gone too far. So let's go back up here. This is the part 48.12, which applies when there has been lapping taking place in an event. If the clerk of the course considers it safe to do so. So firstly, the first condition to be met is the clerk of the course considers it safe. He has declared the track safe. And the message, lapped cars may now overtake, has been sent to all competitors via the official messaging system. That needs to be sent to all cars, and the reason it needs to be sent to all cars is because those that are eligible to unlap need to know that they're going to be doing the unlapping, and those that are on the lead lap need to be made aware that some cars are now going to be passing you because they are going to be unlapping. Meaning, if you are weaving around to try and maintain temperature in your tyres, don't do that, because you're now going to have some cars going to be passing you. Hence, the need for the message to go to all cars. So, condition 1, the track being safe. Condition 2, all competitors being made aware that this is now going to take place. Any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. That's a requirement. A requirement. This is a required step of a safety car deployment. This is the qualifying criteria. This is why they used the word any. The word any here is any car, and the caveat, they really probably to make it more clearer, but nobody questioned it prior to Abu Dhabi 2021. But in brackets, they could have put which meet the qualifying criteria, because it doesn't mean all. If they use the word all there, all cars that have been lapped, well, it doesn't apply to all if you've not met the qualifying criteria. It's only any, and like I say, it should in parenthesis say any cars which meet the qualifying criteria that have been lapped by the leader will, okay, and this is the qualifying criteria. This will only apply to cars that were lapped at the time they crossed the line at the end of the lap, during which they crossed the first safety car line for the second time after the safety car was deployed. So that means if you were lapped when the incident happened, or are lapped during the first initial stages of that safety car, the first lap and probably the lap of the safety car, then you get to unlap. If you become lapped after you have crossed that first safety car line for the second time, so for example, you weren't lapped, you go into the pits after going around for a lap and a half, 2 laps, and then you then pit, and whilst you're in the pits, you get lapped. Unlucky, you don't get to unlap. That's what they have defined as the qualifying criteria. So, having overtaken the cars on the lead lap and the safety car, these cars should then proceed around the track at an appropriate speed. An appropriate speed is meaning the track is still under yellows. Until the safety car is withdrawn, all cars are lapping around that track under yellows. The entire track is under yellow conditions, so you are not driving flat out. So an appropriate speed, appropriate to yellow conditions, without overtaking, and make every effort to take up position at the back of the line of cars behind the safety car. Whilst they are overtaking, and in order to ensure that this may be carried out safely, the cars on the lead lap must always stay on the racing line unless deviating from it is unavoidable. Unless the clerk of the course considers the presence of the safety car is still necessary, once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. The last lapped car of this, any cars that are required to pass the leader, well, the any was all 8 met the qualifying criteria, hence all 8 were required to pass. Once the last of them, which was Mick Schumacher, well, that never happened. So there is the breach of the regulation. The safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. So they get, once you've been released, you get the remainder of the lap that you are released on, plus an additional lap of that safety car with which to make it around the track and try to catch the back of that safety car snake. Now, if you are released halfway around a lap and you get then one more lap above that, so you get a lap and a half, often that is enough time for those released cars to make it around the track and catch the back of the safety car snake. If, however, you are released late in a lap, just the tiny bit remaining in that lap plus the lap of the safety car may not be enough. And if it's not, this is where the 15.3, the overriding authority of the race director, then kicks in. He can look at that situation, and if he is not satisfied that the sporting fairness has been returned to these released cars, he can keep that safety car on track for a further lap. Despite this regulation saying the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap, the race director has the overriding authority to say, I will override that withdrawal and keep it lapping, because these cars are still not caught the back of the safety car snake. Michael Massey did exactly that at Brazil 2019, Spain 2019, Sakir 2020, Eiffel 2020. 4 Grand Prix where he was race director, where he kept the safety car on the track for an additional lap beyond the mandatory lap. That demonstrated Michael Massey's knowledge of the regulations and their purpose. That is categoric proof of Massey's knowledge. His conduct demonstrates his understanding. So, and that is the extent of 15.3. 15.3 does not enable the race director to not carry out this procedure. By not carrying out this procedure, it produces skewed outcomes. You leave, if you do not release the lapped cars, which they present as being an optional process, which it categorically is not. If you qualify, you have to be released. You end up in a situation where, in the example of Lando Norris's battle versus Pierre Gasly, you have a competitor that loses a lap on somebody that they should be challenging for position. Don't just describe them as backmarkers. These people are in the top 10 of the race, challenging each other for World Championship points. That is the impact of not carrying this out. So race control cannot use overriding authority to not carry this out. So all you can do is extend it if, for example, sporting fairness has not been returned to the competitors. If Lando Norris, for example, is still 30 seconds adrift of Gasly at the point in time that the safety car should be coming back to the pits. And you're like, well, he's still 30 seconds behind. No, I need to keep this safety car on track. Or if the race director identifies another safety issue, or the clerk of the course identifies another safety issue, we've now encountered another problem. We've now seen some more debris on track elsewhere. We've now seen a spectator or a protester enter the track, causing another hazard. We've now seen another car crash on track somewhere else. That has happened. We cannot bring in this safety car. So despite the regulation saying the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap, if there is still a safety hazard that needs dealing with, you keep the safety car on there, and that is 15.3. Despite the completion of this step, if there's still a problem, race director has the overriding authority to say, no, despite that step being completed, we're still using it. That is what 15.3 is actually all about. Anyway, it's nothing to do with regulation tripping over and hybrid solution. If the clerk of the course considers track conditions are unsuitable for overtaking, the message overtaking will not be permitted. So what this means is, if what we've had before, earlier in the season at Saudi, was this presentation that the tyre barrier is damaged, a car has gone into the tyre barrier, and that barrier is not safe. Should another car go into the tyres at that same point, those tyres will not perform the job they're designed to do, and that could result in an injury to the driver. Now we need to repair this barrier, and that is going to take some time. Now, what in those circumstances, the track conditions are still unsuitable for overtaking, and if the amount of time taken that it's going to take to deal with such a situation, they would then red flag. As we saw, that is what they did in Saudi. That could have all been a contrivance and a manipulation, but let's just pretend it's all authentic and above board. I'm just using that example as to how they deal with these situations and for that reasoning. But if now we get to a situation like we got in Abu Dhabi 2021, we get onto the penultimate lap 57. Is it suitable for overtaking? Well, yes, it is, but ultimately, even if you release them, we're not going to get a race. So it's a futile process. So it kind of not worth even doing. So that's the kind of situation where you get overtaking will not be permitted. Now, what they presented at Abu Dhabi 2021 was the message on an FIA branded banner going across the top of the screen saying lapped cars will not be allowed to overtake. It's not mandatory, says Brundle. Nope, says Crofty. Affirming each other. And that's not an official message. It doesn't appear in the regulations. Overtaking will not be permitted. Well, everybody understands that because it applies to everybody. Overtaking will not be permitted. Everybody understands nobody is allowed to overtake. Lapped cars will not be allowed to overtake. Well, who does that apply to? Lapped cars can't overtake who? They can't overtake the cars that are on the lead lap, so they can't unlap. Can cars that haven't been lapped, can they overtake? Who can they overtake? The cars that have been lapped, once the cars on the lead lap have overtaken them, if they get blue flags, if racing restarts, can then they start overtaking each other? Too many questions. We need to create simple instructions to give to competitors as they're travelling around at 200 miles an hour so that they all understand what these regulations are. That's how rules and regulations of sport are. That's how they are devised, so that everybody understands them and that they're fit for purpose. That was a contrivance at Abu Dhabi 2021. So, when the clerk of the course decides it's safe to call in the safety car, the message safety car in this lap will be sent to all competitors via the official messaging system and the car orange lights will be extinguished. This is a signal to the competitors and drivers it will be entering the pits at the end of that lap. Now that is just a simple step-by-step instruction. That doesn't override anything. That is just, once you have carried out this here, 48.12, then once you're then withdrawing the safety car, and bearing in mind the race director has the overriding authority to keep it there if he sees it fit, once then you decide to withdraw it, then you're going to be given this message, safety car in this lap. And this is what will happen. But even once you've given that message, if then there's a problem that occurs and you then consider the situation and said, oh, actually, now there's a problem. I've just given the message, safety car in this lap, but as I was giving that message, somebody's just crashed their car. Cancel that. We are still under safety car. The safety car's not coming in. We've now got another incident to deal with. Race directors overriding authority over the use of the safety car on the grounds of safety. So this regulation 48.13, that can be overridden as well due to the race director's overriding authority 15.3. Can you see any tripping over? Can you see regulations tripping over one another, or can you see the function of the regulation? Their clear purpose when related to clear context that the expert of the sport cannot give you. Strange that, isn't it? Strange that the expert Martin Brundle cannot explain that to you.
They, of course, have to proceed with caution anyway. And you know what? Even
and he's talking about the release cars there.
Clear, although they, of course, have to proceed with caution anyway. And you know what? Even knowing who the lap cars are is not as straightforward as you might think, because
it is, Martin. It's extremely straightforward because on data view you have the list of cars that are lapped. It says +1 lap. Another way of looking at it is you see that snake of cars and you know that Lewis Hamilton is winning the race, and if you look at that safety car snake, the car directly behind Lewis Hamilton is Lando Norris. He's not second in the race because we know that Max Verstappen was second in that race. So what position is Lando Norris in? Oh, he is in, well, he was in 8th and he got promoted to 7th when Perez retired mysteriously when he didn't have a problem with his car. Really? Yep, box. So knowing that Norris is the car directly behind Hamilton, that would indicate he's been lapped. So if Norris is in 8th and he's been lapped, and assuming that nobody's been lapped twice, then we know for sure that Lando Norris in 8th and everybody behind him in that race, so if we know there's 14 competitors in the race, for example, we know 8th down to 14th have all been lapped. It's not difficult, Martin. But Martin will say even knowing who the lapped cars are is not as straightforward as you might think. This is the expert gaslighting the audience, using what he's reading here as a prepared script.
You get a safety car situation and some cars pit, and that means they are then lapped, or the leader pits and unlaps some other cars. So
the second scenario that you gave there didn't happen because the leader didn't pit. The first scenario was this notion of eligibility to unlap. And again, Abu Dhabi 2021, the computer system would identify those that would not be eligible, but it was clear to everybody that was watching the event that all 8 qualified.
It takes a certain amount of time to work out exactly who the lap runners are, where they are in the pack, but the fundamental point of that rule is to make sure that they don't get in the way of a great duel towards the end of.
This is the way Martin Brundle describes it. The fundamental point of that, what do you call it, a rule? Yes, the fundamental point of that rule
is to make sure runners are where they are in the pack, but the fundamental point of that rule is to make sure that they don't get in the way of a great duel towards the end of a Grand Prix. And that.
So he's talking about a great duel. When has a Grand Prix been a duel? A contest between two adversaries? No, it's a Grand Prix. It's a event where it's a race between all competitors in that race. You cannot just separate out two adversaries and say this is just going to be between you two. That's not a Grand Prix. The fundamental purpose of it is nothing to do with getting them out of the way of a duel between two chosen competitors. The fundamental purpose of it is the impact that the deployment of that safety car had on the race of the likes of Lando Norris and all those behind him in that running order. When the cars that they would like to be competing against, such as Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, and all the cars ahead of them, they disappear off around the track. Lando Norris, Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon, and the others, they're not allowed to. They have to wait behind the safety car. They have to wait until the track is safe, and then this procedure is carried out where they then get to make that ground back. It's how they deal with a safety incident. That's the manner that they have chosen to do this. That's the order that they then do it in. Martin is lying about that. Lying about the purpose. And this is how they manipulate.
Certainly happened, didn't it?
It certainly did. You mentioned there about kind of the legal battles and such. Like how
Tarquin here, old Rupert in his jacket, would now draw our attention to legal battles and listen to the framing of the question. How sad would you be?
How sad would you be to see this all decided?
How sad? Give me your emotional response to this, Martin. Yes, let's talk about sadness.
At some point in a courtroom.
This is the way the Rothschilds' banking system would frame the narrative. The approved version, distributed to all the world's news agents as approved news through Reuters, owned by Rothschild. How sad. Wait there, let me fast forward the advert. We're back. Tarquin has just asked Martin how sad he would be if this is decided in a courtroom.
It would be terribly sad. And
yes, he'd find it terribly sad. Why would that be, Martin? Because it will be going to court, Martin.
And I can't really see where it can go if
I'll show you, Martin. I know you can't see, but don't you worry. I'll hold your hand and I'll take you through it, lad.
I'm honest, because, what's the remedy? For example...
What's the remedy? Quite simple, Martin. Okay? The governing body has broken the rules of the sport, invalidating the sporting contest from that moment onwards. Now, what you can do, you can declare results in Grand Prix when they don't reach their completion. That has happened plenty of times in the past. Results have been declared in the Grand Prix when it's not reached its full intended completed distance. Now, when we know that the rules of the sport are broken on lap 57, invalidating all that took place beyond that, we can rewind and say, well, it was a official race where it complied with the rules of the sport up until the end of lap 56, and we can declare that result as the running order at the end of lap 56. That's where it can go, Martin. And any organisation with integrity would do that. They would recognise that the only valid outcome would have been a safety car finish. Therefore, there could have been no overtaking. By breaking the rules, they set up something, enabling a change of order in that cars that should never have taken place.
Red Bull didn't do anything wrong. There are no...
Red Bull did nothing wrong. Rules were broken, creating something that should never have happened. It's nothing to do with Red Bull did nothing wrong. No, you've invalidated the event. It doesn't matter what the competitors did if those who are organising and running the event fail to comply with the rules that contest must be contested under. It invalidates the contest from that point onwards. That's the situation. You have obliterated. Did Lewis Hamilton do anything wrong? Did Mercedes do anything wrong? No, they didn't do anything wrong. So why are they now screwed? But instead you're saying, well, we need to feel here for Red Bull. They didn't do anything wrong. Lewis Hamilton didn't do anything wrong, Martin. Mercedes could have done things better, but they didn't do anything wrong, because the data would suggest it would be a safety car finish, and as such you do not risk losing track position, so therefore in that regard they didn't do anything wrong either, Martin. I can't really see where this would go, says Martin.
Misdemeanors on their part, or
there were no misdemeanors on Red Bull's part. Oh, okay, well we can look at the narrative and we can look at what F1 TV played on lap 57, where the notion of Red Bull seeking to put pressure on the race director, saying we only need one racing lap. Well, on lap 57, which is when F1 TV chose to play that message to us, and the cars haven't been released yet, then there is no chance of any more racing in this. So who was setting up that narrative?
Carlos Sainz coming in third for Ferrari, for example, Yuki Tsunoda for Alfa.
Yes, how do we unravel this? Carlos Sainz in third, for example. Yes, let's focus on Carlos Sainz in third. For example, Martin, was he afforded the chance of taking part in this great duel? You know, the fundamental purpose of getting those cars out of the way is so that they don't interfere in a duel. What about is a fundamental purpose so they don't interfere in a threesome, Martin? Because Carlos Sainz was excluded from the threesome, and they always celebrate the top three, don't they, Martin? But third wasn't allowed to contest the top two. So there's a problem there, isn't there, Martin? Carlos Sainz in third, for example. Yuki, yeah, you've said his name, but you've not explained the impact it had on his ability to challenge for silver or gold in that event.
Tari, how are you going to unravel all of that? You can't just...
How are you going to unravel all of that? Well, Martin, the running order is that at the end of lap 56, very clear. This should have been a safety car finish, which should have meant that lap 57 completed behind the safety car, lap 58 completed behind the safety car, no changes to that running order which was there at the end of lap 56. Hence declaring that result as being the running order at the end of lap 56 is entirely valid. What we have is the empirical evidence that during those final two laps, no car crashed out, no car suffered mechanical failure. Hence, that is a valid decision to make because nothing changed in those last two laps other than a race-off was illegally staged, which caused changes of position that should never have happened.
Suddenly count back a lap.
Yes, you can. But the expert of the sport is claiming that you can't just suddenly do that.
How are you going to unravel all of that? You can't just suddenly count back a lap, because I don't think there's any precedent or regulation.
I don't think there's any precedent or regulation. Well, you see, you don't write regulations for when race control breaks its own rules to defraud the world. These are the instructions you must then follow. So when something unprecedented happens, you are then required to deal with the situation. In dealing with that situation, you set the precedent. This has happened for the first time. We've identified that it is clearly wrong and this needs righting. This is the appropriate way of writing it. This is the precedent we have set for writing this situation. That's how precedents are set. When you deal with a specific situation that's not been dealt with before, then you look at the specifics of the situation and you deal with it in the appropriate way, setting the precedent. We've now encountered this. This is new to us. We've not got anything existing as a framework ruling to copy. But this is again legal. We have the notion of judges copying and pasting the judgment of judges from cases that are different, may have some sort of similarity, but rather than a judge having the wherewithal to evaluate the specifics of each unique situation, they don't seem to have the wherewithal to do so. Instead, they have to copy and paste a judgment of another judge that they look back in a book to say, oh, well, back in 1932, this judge, in this case between this person and this person, where the dynamics of the situation were different, but this judge said this about that. Well, because they said this about that, then I too can rely upon this about that, applied to this set of circumstances which are different. That's the judiciary. They put on the costume, act as though they've got some sort of integrity, and that's their legal expertise. That's their ability to be able to oversee a situation and make a valid ruling on it. Don't you worry, little heads. They serve wealth and power, the agenda of the banking controllers of this world. Do your research into who owns the British government, when they who lent the monarchy money when Britain was almost bankrupt, and then bought government bonds on the cheap when their private secret services reported back to them earlier, giving them advance information about a situation that they used insider trading to then essentially buy the bonds on the cheap and then essentially own the country. And now the country is subservient to the banking elites who hide behind layers but ultimately control governments, control media, control our minds through what the information that we're fed. They control the written press, they control the printing presses, the books, the version of history that we are led to believe. The state of Israel wasn't set up for a land, a safe haven for the religiously persecuted. It was set up for Mr. Rothschild in the Balfour Declaration to give them a position to project power in the region, because that's what they do. They want to control everything, all of the world's resources. They want control over and hold everybody to ransom for it. They control the money. They hold everybody to ransom. That's why we're all enslaved to the system that they sit at the top of. Government, monarchy, all controlled by the banking system and their teams of assassins, the secret services there that are protecting you. They're protecting the banking situation, the banksters of the world. Anyway, back to Brundle.
Regulation to suggest that what should have happened is we should have had a red flag.
So, again, think of all these things that Brundle's going to be throwing in there. Red Bull did nothing wrong. How do you unravel that? You can't count back a lap or two. We should have had a red flag. All of this is irrelevant. we've had the fundamental purpose of that is that they don't get in the way of a great duel. These are the things he's thrown out so far for people to believe in, to argue in the comments of social media. That's what Martin Brundle has done. So far, everything he said is bullshit, and that is what then people have seized upon, and this is what then became the contents of the comment sections of social media. And other people would have written articles in a similar fashion.
So that then the mess could get cleared away of the accident. Drivers could then choose their tyres, and there would have been a 3-lap shootout.
A 3-lap shootout. A shootout. See, the term shootout wasn't really heard of. I don't recall the term shootout as a term in Formula One prior to 2021. Might have been used, but I don't recall the term shootout. This is a shootout. There was, I think they used it in relation to qualifying, maybe, but not in a race. What part of a race is a shootout? Well, firstly, we're racing cars, lads. We're not getting guns out. We're not shooting anybody. And what are we shooting out? It's not an elimination where it comes down to the last two and then it's just them going head to head. No, this is a race where everybody's competing against each other. It's not a shootout. And the deployment of a red flag, the circumstances where you would wave a red flag are when the track is blocked and there's no way through, so that when these cars encounter the crash site, the track has got a row of cars. I've seen a Formula E clip where essentially there's about 3 or 4 cars blocking the entire track. So as each of these cars get to that point of the track, there's nowhere for them to go. So you can't do lapping under safety car because you can't get by that place. Red flag. Everybody just stop. So that's one situation where you'd throw a red flag. Another situation is where it's clear that somebody needs medical attention. We need to deploy the medical car. We need to deal with a medical emergency. The car's lapping is completely secondary. The major concern is dealing with somebody that needs medical attention. Stop the race. Deal with a casualty. And thirdly is when you determine that this clear-up operation is going to take excessively long. Now, what is reasonable in terms of the duration of a clear-up operation is the clear-up operation and all the checks being done in approximately 3 to 4 laps of the track. That takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes of 3 to 4 laps under safety car situations, approximately 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the nature of the incident, the nature of the track. Okay, but this is what it takes. The safety car will be deployed. It will still be a minute or two before anybody's allowed on the track because they have to be sure that the cars have decelerated to a safe speed, that all cars are travelling at that safe speed. Nobody's unaware and is still bombing it around the track at a ridiculous speed. Okay, so that, right, everybody's now travelling slow. Everybody is now aware of where the incident is on track, so that when they come by that particular place, they know now that there's likely to be people on the track and to drive in an extra cautious manner. So that takes time to get to that phase. Then you can start putting people on the track. Then you can start putting cranes on the track. The clear-up operation, if there's a fire that needs to be put out, it's going to add to that. The first situation that you've got to focus on is the removal and recovery of the vehicle. Get that out of the way, get it safe. Sweep any track debris, any debris that's on the track to ensure that the track surface is safe. Make sure there's nothing in and around that situation that's going to be a problem. If there's any barriers that have been damaged, they need to be checked. Any repairs need to be done. And once the clerk of the course is satisfied, everything's now good, he can radio back. Now, whilst that operation is going on, because the checking of the barriers will be, that clerk of the course might well be checking the barriers whilst the recovery of the car is taking place and whilst the marshals are sweeping the track. And it might be that they are doing their checks and they're like, yeah, it's fine. Or it might be, yeah, it's good. Oh shit, it's not. So we've been checking the barriers. We thought it's good. We've got to this section of barriers and we've realised there's a problem with this bit. Now we're going to need to spend another 5 to 10 minutes doing this. That extra 10 minutes is going to be another 4 laps behind the safety car. Rather than take another 4 laps behind the safety car, let's stop the event so we don't take another 4 laps out of this race. But that situation's already been going on for 3 or 4 laps. So it's not an immediate red flag. An appropriate amount of time for a safety car situation, as I've demonstrated, the average is 5.5 laps to deal with such a situation that we saw with Nicholas Latifi. On average, 5.5 laps are taken out of a Grand Prix to deal with that sort of situation, to deal with the recovery of the situation, the track clear up, checking of the barriers, and then the unlapping procedure. So providing that it's going to be dealt with within that period of time, within approximately 5.5 laps, and with that being an average, that could be anything between 4 to 6 and a bit, that kind of duration, that's normal. That is the sort of situation that you will deal with each time with a safety car. And clearly that situation met that normal, that met that criteria. It was clear that the track was declared safe on lap 57. So then you can release those cars, but the regulation is safety car will come in at the end of the following lap, comes in at the end of lap 58. Still a safety car finish. There were 5.4 laps remaining. We could have got racing again after 5.4 laps, but it happened to be the end of the race, so we couldn't. But the amount of time that was required was normal. So you wouldn't deal with it in an abnormal way. The normal way is safety car. So your proposal of a red flag is again a fraudulent red herring to feed to the masses to argue about in the comments section of social media.
Towards the end, strictly speaking, the regulations suggest.
Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest. Regulations don't suggest. Regulations are a set of instructions that must be followed. It's not, strictly speaking, suggestions.
Suggest that the safety car should have completed the next lap, and in fact.
And that's the crux. Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest that the safety car should have completed the next lap. So let's just go to that. No, that's the wrong document. I'm here. Once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Martin Brundle words that. Strictly speaking, the regulations make a suggestion. That's not the suggestion box of the regulations, Martin. But thanks for your valuable insight.
And there would have been a 3-lap shootout towards the end.
A shootout. I saw your facial expression. That would excite a 3-lap shootout.
Strictly speaking, the regulations suggest that the safety car should have completed the next lap, and in fact.
That's exactly what it is. Nothing to do with, strictly speaking, suggestions. That is a requirement. That didn't happen. That enabled that fraudulent last lap, which should never have taken place. Had it have not taken place, the result of the race would be completely different. The other guy would have won. a new record in the sport would have been set. History would have been made. Why are you not talking about that, Brundle?
The regulations do allow for, if it's going to be a safety car
They allow for that, do they?
finish. In other words, an accident just cannot be cleared away in time. The safety car pulls in the pits. There can be no overtaking. So the glorious shot for the world to see on the TV and the photographers is not of a safety car with its lights blaring away with the winner behind it, but a racing car and a racing driver. So all sorts of provisions in there. As I say, we ended up with a bit of
all sorts of provisions in there, yeah, for a specific reason. Because if you don't carry out those provisions, those step-by-step instructions, you end up with what we ended up with, which is invalid. You end up with 7th place being cast adrift over a minute 20 seconds behind 6th, when previously they were only 11.2 seconds behind. Other cars that were 11.8 seconds behind the car they were behind, well, they got to catch right behind them. Why should one that was 11.2 seconds behind now be 1 minute 20 seconds behind? That's not fair, is it? That's what these provisions make sure never happen, Martin. 3rd place, well, he's in that race. He's one of the leaders, isn't he, Martin? He had 2 lapped cars blocking him from directly challenging 2nd on that restart. That impacts 3rd from getting in the way of a duel. A Grand Prix isn't a duel, Martin. So these provisions in the regulations, they're for a purpose. They're for sporting fairness to everybody, because what underpins the sporting regulations is the FIA International Sporting Code, which states that these regulations will never be applied in such a manner as to impede sporting contest. And you've impeded sporting contest to Lando Norris, to Carlos Sainz, and to various other drivers in that event, demonstrating that it was invalid, an invalid interpretation. So it doesn't matter what legally I'm going to not swear in this video, a learned individual wearing a cape and a wig and a costume that's able to speak like this to obviously project to the world that they're the intelligent ones, and obviously not a commoner like myself. That what would somebody like him know when he just speaks like this? Yeah, exactly. They know more than me because they can speak with magnificence of the Emperor's new clothes. So yeah, because they will project themselves like that, the world will believe the illusion of grandeur. But I'll just tell you the basic truth. It's not rocket science. It's not a highly complex technical sport. Don't you worry your little head. I'll just explain it to you. Yeah, the cars have got complexities, and most people aren't that bothered. Most people aren't going to go into the intricacies of the intricate design of these cars and what each function does and how it does it, right? And why it's done a certain way that makes that way of doing it better than another way of doing it. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. That's what the designs of the technical regulations, as to the technical definition, the technical design criteria of the cars. The sporting criteria is how racing is carried out, what needs to happen when you're actually contesting sport. That bit's easy. This is how we go racing. This is how we play this sport, because the sport's about racing these technical machines. A person being the driver of a technical machine. But this is, once we engage in these races, this is the rules of the races. That's all it is. And that bit is simple. So don't let anybody in a costume convince you otherwise.
a hybrid of all that, and
We ended up with a hybrid. Thanks for that, Martin.
you can look at it and argue that it
You could argue, because they want you to argue, because that then ignites the social media. You could argue all of these things that Martin Brundle has proposed to you, rather than the simple truth, because nobody was articulating the simple truth. And this is when I was watching this and saying, how come nobody's identifying the simple truth? He's brushed upon it. He brushed upon it, going, strictly speaking, they do suggest that the safety car should come in at the end of the following lap. And I was thinking, well, that's it. Why are you not saying that is the crux of the matter? That is the only thing that matters here, really, Martin. Just say that. Focus on that. And that expose it to it. No, that's just a suggestion. A strictly speaking. And when you say strictly speaking, that is the way that you articulate something to people that go, well, strictly speaking, it could be that, but that's the way that people perceive the notion of when somebody says strictly speaking. Means that, oh, this is what you're supposed to do, but. And it's that but. And that is how language gets understood. If you were to say, no, there is a strict requirement to do this, then that's different. But when you say strictly speaking, they suggest that means different. That is understood in a different way by people. And you know that. This is why what you're reading has been constructed this way, Brundle. That's the approved version. The approved version that Reuters would feed all news outlets that feed the official narrative to the global population.
played so heavily into Red Bull's hands at that point that it was unfair. But then Red Bull played some.
It played into Red Bull's hand. That was unfair. But Red Bull played some clever cards. We're motor racing. We're not playing cards, Martin.
Clever cards with their strategy. Perhaps on the first virtual safety car, Mercedes-Benz were a little bit too cautious, leaving.
They played clever cards with their strategy. No, this is nothing to do with strategy, Martin. Nothing to do with strategy. The race was unfolding. Lewis Hamilton was winning it by almost 12 seconds. With 5.4 laps to go, Nicholas Latifi then crashed. That 11.8 second lead that Hamilton had over Verstappen did not appear to be eroding. Max Verstappen did not appear to be gaining. It did not look like there was going to be a grandstand finish. Lewis Hamilton looked on course to win that race. Where is clever cards? What's so clever about cards and strategy with that, Martin? How clever are those cards without Nicholas Latifi's crash, Martin? They don't appear to be that clever. That cleverness, oh, you're losing by 11.8 seconds. Mercedes are cautious with their tyres. Did they look on course to win it? Yeah, they did. Did they get to the end of the race on those tyres? Yeah, they did. Did it look like Max Verstappen was going to catch Lewis? No, they didn't, without having that time gap eroded due to a safety car and having the cars that were in between them just cleared out of his way, because whilst there were five lapped cars in that safety car, Snake, before the crash there were still 3 lapped cars in between Hamilton and Verstappen, because Verstappen never lapped Ocon, Alonso and Norris. Hamilton had, but Verstappen never ever did. He had lapped Leclerc and Vettel, but when he pitted, those 2 cars became unlapped relative to Verstappen, hence became in that one of those 5 cars in between Hamilton and Verstappen. But Verstappen never lapped Ocon, Alonso and Norris. How clever are your cards, Red Bull? Then, when you look at the data, when that safety car happened, Mercedes, rightfully, assessed the situation and determined it's highly likely to be a safety car finish. Do not risk losing track position because the tyres that you are on mean nothing behind a safety car. Providing they get you to the end of the event without failing, then nobody can overtake you. You don't need to go at racing speed. The performance, as long as they can keep up with a safety car, not a problem. You don't need to change them. What's so clever about Red Bull's cards there? Those cards only become clever when the rules are broken. Martin there. Clever cards.
And 44 laps to go on a set of tyres.
Which he did.
So, there was some clever strategy going on, but then
some clever strategy. A clever strategy by Red Bull, being almost 12 seconds behind with just over 5 laps remaining. Very clever by Red Bull. Thank you for that, Martin Brundle.
Red Bull had nothing to lose.
They had nothing to lose. No, but they weren't going to win anything either, Martin, were they?
Hamilton had the speed and had the lead, and so Red Bull had plenty of space behind them and grabbed a couple of safety car stops. So that's the way the cookie.
So is that clever cards, is it? You got somebody that's losing and they take a free pit stop and you class that as clever cards. Take a free pit stop where they're not in any jeopardy of losing any position. They know that they're not going to lose time under a safety car because you bunch up. There's nothing clever about that. But the rules and regulations are that the race doesn't restart. So actually there's nothing clever about putting your car onto new tyres that you're not going to be able to go racing on. That's the way the cookie crumbled, though. That's the way the cookie crumbled.
Crumbled.
Martin.
Anyway, before Tarquin...
There was loads of, let's call them...
Oh, Rupert. Loads of new fans.
New Formula One fans watching yesterday. Can you see the positive that, right, they've had all that drama?
That experienced the drama. As you can see from this red bar at the bottom, I'm 4 minutes 22 through this 9-minute, 46-minute long presentation. I've probably been talking for over an hour. I will find out when I upload this video. So I'm going to have to do a part 2. Remember, never forget this. This is what they did. This is what they all did. Every form of media, every TV media, every written form of media, newspapers, social media news channels, social media video channels, motorsport publications such as Autosport, Motorsport. Every single one of them complied with the same narrative. Not a single one of them explained the situation in the manner that I do on this channel. Not a single one. Supposedly trusted broadcasters, the BBC, mainstream, Channel 4, ITV, every newspaper, every official channel, the sport itself, Formula One, Sky Sports, whatever the major sports broadcaster in your country which has got the accreditation to broadcast Formula One, they all comply with the same narrative. Remember, this is the example that people need to see, because this is what they do with everything. This is not just Formula One that they do this with. Whatever is taking place in this world, we get fed the version of events that they want us to believe. They manufactured consent for what is taking place in Gaza. They manufactured consent by all media outlets feeding the same narrative about what was taking place in the Middle East. They describe it as being this one event, this day where the rebel forces from Palestine committed some sort of massacre of the Israelis. That is how they present it. They present that as being day dot of the situation, and therefore Israel having a right to defend itself. They don't tell you about the systematic oppression of Israel over Palestine, over Gaza, the continual attacks, the continual killings, until people decide there needs to be a rebellion against this, we need to fight back. And then the moment something happens, and who knows, that could have been a false flag. We do not have the full details. We've only got the approved narrative of it fed to us. Then they use that as the excuse to then obliterate a race of people with a genocide. And that's just one world event. How many events are the same? Time and time and time and time again. All of the wars that ever take place. All of the places where America exerts its force. On behalf of whom? Go and read the accounts of the military veterans who have served, who then realised that they weren't fighting for freedom. They weren't fighting for the freedom of their people. They were being used as mercenaries to further the interests of global capital, further the interests of those who ultimately came and swept in after the military and took control of the resources of that country. Assassinated the leaders of a regime that would not comply, would not allow their country to be exploited by the Rothschild banking system. And so them leaders get assassinated. There are staged coups. Various parties get funded, get supplied weapons, causing civil wars, overthrowing governments, and then what gets planted is puppet governments that then serve the banking elites, allow a Rothschild banking system in their country, allow the mineral reserves to be removed and put under the control of the financial elites. Now, we've got false enemies as well, haven't we? We've got China, that's an opposing empire. We've got Russia, that's potentially an opposing. There's all sorts of different narratives going on. It's the fight for control. It's the Game of Thrones for the world, isn't it? But it's the private ownership, all hidden behind layers of deception. But we're all mind conditioned in this media matrix of lies. So never forget. And develop your understanding of it so that you can start talking to other people about the reality. And go looking on social media at different accounts. Don't believe everything, but assess it. Okay? Break it down, and if you can't verify it, remain open-minded. Seek further proof. Bit by bit, you'll start seeing the picture. They purposefully obfuscate it. They don't want people to actually see what's really going on, because if everybody saw what was going on, then everybody would be aligned in a revolution against those who are actually oppressing each and every one of us and exploiting each and every one of us. Hence, they've layered everything, they've kept themselves hidden, and they have at their disposal all of these devices, such as media, such as puppeted governments, such as court systems, such as their secret service agencies, their assassination teams, and such as the stormtroopers, the military and the police, which protect their power, serve their agenda. That's what is happening in this world. So that will do on this part. Thank you for those of you that have watched this through. I hope you found it informative. Never forget, remember that they purposefully put Brundle with this presentation in front of us and gave us all of these talking points that Brundle was on about, and which one of those are relevant. I've defined the clear criteria. I've explained the rules. I've gone through them. I've explained how you apply them in a clear manner. And yet the expert of the sport and no expert of the sport, despite them being Sky Sports, they can't. Can you not see that that's a massive problem? And it's not just a massive problem. It's done by design. That's a fraud. But this is what happens with every form of media. All the news outlets, they feed us the approved narrative, the version of events that they want people to believe, as this is what's happening, this is the reason that this is happening, and it's not that. Who's benefiting? What's the agenda? Thanks for your time.